Alright guys, I've got another cut test for you today, and we are going to be testing the Knifeworks exclusive Spyderco Manix 2 XL with the CPM S90V. Now I have recently reground this blade. The edge thickness is between 0.22 and 0.27 millimeters, so it is quite thin and should cut extremely well. Edge is 30 degrees inclusive. The factory bevel was 30 degrees inclusive, and I have just basically refined the factory edge and taken it to that next level of sharpness. Finish is taken to 2000 grit on a Silicon Carbide hone and then stropped on a strop of mixed grits between, I'd say, 7 micron and 2.5 micron. So it's a little coarser than I typically leave the edge for these cut tests, but given that this is S90V and generally speaking you put a coarser edge on it, much coarser than this in fact, but this is what I left it at. It is hair whittling, whittles hair quite readily, and will cleanly slice phonebook paper. So let's get started before we waste too much more time. So initial sharpness, quite high. Alright, this is phonebook paper from the exact same phonebook that I've used in all the other cut tests to try to, at least have some semblance of a control. The rope I'm using is from the same roll as the rope from all the other cut tests I've done. And the basic methodology is going to be very similar to J. Davis 882's test. He's the one that sort of popularized these tests on YouTube. And I'm trying to sort of use the same methods he did to be able to compare data points more closely than if I just made up my own cut test. So we have 3 feet of 3/4 inch sisal rope unwound into 3 strands, each being 3 feet, thus equaling 9 feet total. So we are going to start cutting the rope. Additionally, as I've said in my other cut test, I'm using just a plain 2x4 as the cutting board to sort of eliminate the variable of toughness from this test, because if you use a polymer cutting board or a hardwood cutting board, you're much more likely to inflict damage on your edge when you do cut through that rope and impact the cutting board. So right now, all I want to test for is wear resistance. And that's sort of what I've adapted this test to test for. Alright, first probably dozen cuts. Let's check for sharpness. Still very cleanly slices phonebook paper, which I would expect. Now in a previous video I did show the edge of this knife, and there was a slight bit of microchipping. It's only on one side of the apex, which is kind of strange, but it doesn't really seem to be affecting cutting that much. It just kind of bugs me. So I was going to reprofile this edge anyway, and I figured why not do a cut test when the edge is already hair whittling, so I'm not just reprofiling it for nothing. Ergonomics aren't bad. The knife it's kind of strange feeling, and wow, I'm bitten my fingernail pretty bad. Also, in a previous video, I had stated that I didn't really know how S90V would compare to something like AUS8, if it would do as good as AUS8. And I wasn't, taking a hit at S90V. Basically, just the way that the two steels dull is different. You know, AUS8 dulls by blunting, whereas S90V dulls by sort of microchipping and sort of the steel around the carbide is getting torn out or abraded, and then if you keep cutting, you can actually tear out the carbides. So they dull quite differently, and honestly, I'm not expecting this to be able to shave hair after this test like the AUS8 did, but we'll see. I will say it's easier to do a push slice than it is to do a draw slice, which it generally is, even though I've sharpened this to have the little micro teeth adapted for cutting best in a draw slice. Let's try choking up on the blade a little bit. Not quite as comfortable. I know there's some people that dislike the forward finger choils. I think they do come in quite handy. A lot of times, instead of using a knife for just cutting things, I use a knife to shape things. If I'm trying to make a part for something I'm building, a lot of times I will choke in that finger choil, and it gives me a whole lot more control with, you know, trying to get the specs of the part I'm making exactly how I need it to fit. So it does come in quite handy. Alright, that's our first 3 feet done. Wipe off the edge. Doesn't appear to be any visible damage. But let's check for sharpness. Still cuts great. Oh, great. Take that off and fell with some metal dust on the sliding platform for my grinder. One of them anyway. Alright, let's continue. I am expecting the edge to tooth up quite a bit when cutting this rope. And as in the other test, I am trying to use the entire edge, sort of spread out the wear on it. Alright, even though the edge is thinner on this, I'm having to use substantially more force than I was on, say, the Kershaw trimmer in HCR 13MOV. And that's because I imagine that the S90V takes a different edge than something hard in there than some of the more grind-friendly steels. So while it was sharp with the manner I used to sharpen it, it didn't have that incredible bite that, you know, I can get on AUS8 and HCR 13MOV, even D2 for that matter. And I'm hoping that when I reprofile this and completely redo that bevel, take out the factory grind lines, that I can achieve that bite that I'm so accustomed to, because that's really what helps it cut well. We'll see. I know conditions for this test aren't ideal, as this is just my tuned up factory edge. So in the future I might redo it once I put one of my edges on there and see if there is any noticeable difference. I assume there probably will be. I also think sometime in the future I need to test an edge off of my wicked edge in the rope cutting, because in just everyday cutting, my freehand edges seem to be more durable than the edges I get off the wicked edge. Hand's getting kind of tired, kind of cramping, because there is a pretty good leverage disadvantage here, because the point of the blade that is making contact with the rope is so far away from my index finger. That's one of the disadvantages to having the forward, 50-50 finger choils, is that it moves that edge up, about ½ an inch, and thus creates a leverage disadvantage when you're trying to cut. It's still going all the way through the rope quite cleanly, which is a good thing. So I've seen on other tests that a lot of times they'll go like halfway through and just stop, and they'll move on, but it's not what I consider a true cut. Alright, we have looks like a micro chip around this area. I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but I can see light sort of reflecting off that one area. Let's see if it affects the cutting any. Still cuts pretty well. Yep, it got that spot. I can tell that it's not cutting as well as it was when I first started, but given I've already cut 6 feet of rope, not bad. Every rope test I've done so far that I've uploaded, the knives have passed and they still cut pretty well when I'm done. One I haven't uploaded, and that's because the knife failed miserably. After the very first cut, the edge could no longer cut the phonebook paper, and I really struggled with the next few cuts. I made it to 7 cuts, and at 7 cuts I actually cut the back of my palm open on the spine of the blade because I was having to put so much force into the cut. And that was a new generation Schrade old timer with their sort of mystery steel, made in China, of course. Still, it's not easy to cut this rope as it should be, even though the grind is sort of suited for high performance cutting now. I can only imagine how hard this would have been with the factory grind on there. And one of the main reasons I re-ground it was because it cuts so poorly. You're going to put a lot of force into cutting anything. Additionally, because the grind lines were so coarse in that shoulder where the primary grind meets the edge bevel, I could feel that dragging in the cut, and it was producing some just really annoying feedback when I was trying to cut through things. that stuff's not getting to the ball bearing lock. That could be potentially dangerous. Seems like it's starting to bite into the rope a little bit better. I don't know if that's because this is a different strand with a possibly different composition, or if it is, in fact, because the edge is starting to toothen up a little bit. The higher carbide steels, when they do start to wear, they do toothen up because you're exposing the carbides, and that's why they can hold a low level of sharpness for so long. Hand is actually kind of starting to slip on the carbon fiber handles because I'm sweating, even though it's cold as hell outside. It's really windy too. That's why my garage door keeps creaking. Actually, why I have it shut, because it was blowing everything around in here. So you can do a push cut. Yep, we can do a push cut. Yay. Last cut. Alright. Wiped any rope residue off. Yeah, I can see that little ding better now. I'll have to put it in a microscope to see exactly what it is. But overall, the edge still looks pretty good. Doesn't feel super sharp, but I'm sure you can still cut the phonebook paper. Yep. Does feel a little toothier now though, and I can feel that little catch. It still makes it through there just fine, but I can feel it, and that's the kind of thing that annoys me. Alright, so let's try some different cutting with this. You can still do a push cut, I'd be surprised. Alright, that was a true 90-degree push cut. That's with the grain. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's with the grain. Let's try to do one cross grain now. Alright, it really don't want to bite in to do a cross grain push cut, but as you saw, it did one with the grain. So it's still pretty sharp. I can actually get the edge on the paper. See if it shaves. I have barely any hair on my arms. So we actually, you can see we have a few hairs on there. So it can still shave, but just barely. Overall performance ain't bad. I must say I do prefer the more basic lower carbide steels because they're a lot easier to keep at that insane level of sharpness. But if this is your cup of tea, it performs quite well. So. See if there's any blade play after that. Got a little bit of side to side, which I guess is expected with these Manix tools, so whatever. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate your time as always. I will see you soon.